No appeasement for a bully. What does China want from a trade meeting with the United States in Switzerland this weekend? China's Vice Premier He Lifeng is visiting Switzerland from Friday, May the 9th through to Sunday, May the 12th. He Lifeng is expected to hold talks with the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. The meeting follows a dramatic escalation in trade tensions, with the tariffs between the two sides reaching 145% and 125%. Now, Beijing has vowed it will not seek to reach any agreement at the expense of sacrificing its principles or the cause of international fairness and justice. Nonetheless, it has agreed to talk at the invitation of the United States. What gives China the confidence to hold its ground? Can the two sides make any headway during this meeting? And with the world's two largest economies locked in a de facto trade impasse, what's at stake for other nations? I'm pleased to be joined from Washington State by Manuel Menendez, founder of MCM Group Holdings, from Singapore by Wang Dan, China Director of Eurasia Group, and here in the studio by Victor Gao, again, Chair Professor at Suzhou University. Thank you and welcome to all of my guests. Manuel, good to have you, and thank you for joining us late on your end. Finally, the two sides are sitting down and talking. What are the two sides expecting to gain? What can the world expect from this meeting?
Well, I think the most important thing is that they're meeting. The key is to have discussions. I don't expect great things to happen. I do expect that the ice will be broken because this trade war doesn't make any sense. There's only losers in a trade war. There's no winners. There's higher prices in the U.S. now. We're leading towards higher inflation. We may be headed towards a recession, and that just came from our Fed Chairman, Jerome Powell. So we have to have the meeting to at least take some initial steps to get rid of these ridiculous tariffs that are really impacting higher costs and higher prices, which is not sustainable in any case. So it's important to have these meetings, and you have to create some kind of roadmap from that. I think there'll be some incremental steps, and then a roadmap will be set to move forward.
Victor, are you expecting this much to happen at this moment? Because China has been very resolute, and given the first quarter performance of the fundamentals of respective economies, who's more desperate here?
Well, first of all, I agree that to have a meeting in Switzerland is better than nothing. And the second point is equally important, that China declared again and again and again that it is fully prepared to fight to the very end if the United States wants to continue this tariff war or trade war, not only against China, but against the rest of the world. So we need to define what is the end. Now, in my best judgment, the end includes the possibility that the two-way trade between China and the United States will grind to a complete halt, initiated by the United States. Now, that will be a huge loss for both China and the United States. Then this will also be a complete shock to the United States, because they originally wanted to impose a kind of embargo against Chinese exports to the United States to be picked and chosen by itself, while the U.S. export to China will have a free walk in the Chinese market. But if the worst comes out of the worst, it will be a complete halt of two-way traffic rather than one-way traffic. Secondly, if you add on other things, for example, service trade and U.S. companies operating in China making huge amount of money, etc., then the total loss to the United States probably will be much more horrendous than the economic losses to be suffered on the Chinese side. So I think Washington needs to be fully prepared that China's resolution to fight this trade war to the very end, because this trade war was an unfair war, unjustified war, initiated by the United States, should not be second-guessed. And I think this is the message that China will bring to Switzerland. If you want to fight, we want to fight with you to the very end. But if you want to really talk, talk with China on equal basis, showing your respect to China, your decency to China. Don't pull off surprises after surprises. You may succeed in a real estate deal in Manhattan, but we are talking about the global international stage where China is as equally important a partner as the United States.
In a recent Chinese Foreign Ministry video, China declared it will never kneel, adding that, for instance, someone has to step forward, torch in hand, to shatter the fog and illuminate the path ahead. When every nation stands tall, the world will break through the walls of hegemony. Wang Dan, how do you look at these very tough lines from China? Is China fighting for itself, or is China fighting on behalf of many other countries who are against the tariffs but probably doesn't have the critical mass to say no and to stand firm on its principles?
This is China's baseline. Actually, for any exporting economy, it needs this trade order, and America clearly is destroying this existing trade order. And both sides, of course, have pretty low expectations on what they can achieve through this negotiation. And actually, China didn't frame this as a negotiation. It's just a talk. It's a start of a contact.
Right.
And it's a very good opportunity for China to figure out if this is a pretest for the U.S. to isolate China, or if there is any hint of sincerity on the U.S. side. So if China can make any progress, it will be a good example for any other country's negotiation talk with the U.S. Because so far, we've seen many rounds of the negotiations between U.S. and the EU, U.S. and Japan without any concrete result. So this is a perfect example that even if you're willing to offer compromise, on the U.S. side, you don't know what they want. You don't know what Trump wants. So this is going to be a marathon. It's not a quick fix.
Well, as bilateral talks approached, President Trump has been sending mixed messages once again. First, he ruled out the possibility of lowering tariffs with a firm no when asked by reporters in the Oval Office on Wednesday. However, speaking just the next day, he signaled the U.S. could drop the tariff. He said, you can't get any higher. It's at 145%, so we know it's coming down. Manuel, what can we make of these statements? Is the U.S. really sincere about bringing down the tariffs so that trade can resume, or is it a front for something else?
Well, I can tell you the business community has all lobbied strongly Washington to tell them to get rid of the tariffs because it's affecting many, many businesses in the States. I think the challenge in business is when there's uncertainty and not predictability. You can see what happened in our U.S. markets where we've lost trillions of dollars in our market cap. In one day, when this was originally announced, Apple lost $300 billion in market value. So there are consequences to what you say and what you do. The challenge with all the countries, whether it's China or Canada or Mexico or any of the countries that we're dealing with, is one day the tariffs are on, the next day they're off. There's always mixed signals. So it's very, very hard to have a discussion when people don't know what the end game is. So I think that the meeting in Switzerland is very important, not only to break the ice. I don't think it's a negotiation, I agree. I think it's getting to know each other's side and then looking at a step-by-step path forward.
The Treasury Secretary actually talked about these trade meet on social media. He said that the United States does not want to decouple from China, but it wants fair trade. Victor, do you see a problem with this framing of the narrative as if for the past decades when China and the United States were trading intensively, it has not been fair?
Well, first of all, decoupling between China and the United States, in my best judgment, is a mission impossible. It's the equivalent of decoupling the Earth from the moon. You can never achieve that goal, or if you really achieve that goal, you are talking about greater catastrophes. Therefore, I firmly believe that China and the United States should not be decoupled, and anyone who wants to decouple China from the United States will eventually be held by history as a culprit rather than a hero. Secondly, China-U.S. trade over these decades have been on commercial terms, fairly recognized by international law. For the United States now, having enjoyed all the benefits of decades of trade with China, to hold a gun at China's head and say, no, this is unfair, you rip me off, you rape me, you bring all the jobs from the United States to China.
Can you give one example as to how much the average American has benefited from trade with China?
Absolutely. All the U.S. families benefited from the good quality toys because they bring joy to their kids. And all the people who read in the United States, the number may be coming down, they benefited from the books printed and made in China. I think all those good Protestants and Catholics, they benefited hugely by reading the Bible made and printed in China. And I think all those patriotic Americans really benefited hugely by saluting the national flag made in China. This is the reality. Anyone who wants to deny that is indulging in historical revisionism and fantasy.
So, according to you, trade is like air. You don't miss it until there's a scarcity of it. Trade with China. Wang Dan, give us an example of what not to do during these trade meetings, because this is not the first time China and the U.S. sit down about tariffs, right? We've had the first Trump term. What about the second term? What not to do when you're talking with China, who is talking about 5,000 years of history and respect? Keep it in 1 minute, please.
Right, and for Trump, I think his misjudgment is that he thought coercion will make China compromise, and that's not going to happen. What's really going to be on the table is that Trump has to roll back all the tariffs he imposed since April, and both sides need to be on the equal footing. And Trump need to understand that for the past 20 years, Chinese goods has been the biggest cushion for the domestic inflation in the U.S. And with the midterm election coming up in 2026, Trump needs a lot of cooperation actually from China's side. And at this point, he might still have some window to achieve some results with China. But as time goes by, the upper hand is actually more and more towards China's hand.
Manuel, what is your judgment in 2 sentences, if you can?
I think both other speakers are correct. I think we have to just get to common sense approach, get rid of the tariffs. They don't help anybody. And we've seen a contraction in our economy. The pain hasn't been fully felt in the U.S., but if it goes on much longer, it will be felt significantly.
Well, we'll keep monitoring the situation. Many thanks to Manuel Menendez, Victor Gao, and of course, Wang Dan. Thank you so much for sharing with us your insights. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. As usual, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. Thank you for watching. You've got The Point.